wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
You're listening to A Quirky Journey, the healthy family podcast with your hosts Jo Whitten and Fuad Kassab.
Welcome back to A Quirky Journey. This is me again, Fuad Kassab, and I've got my awesome friend Jo Whitten here with me again.
Hello.
For the 101 episode of A Quirky Journey.
101. That sounds pretty cool.
It feels like we can reset now. Like we can it's like a fresh start.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that means we have to be even more awesome than usual. No.
Yeah, we don't. If for 100 episodes we weren't awesome, why kind of break that habit? Like, obviously it's working somehow. So we'll keep that going.
Yes.
We have interviewed Soulla Chamberlain from Star Anise Broth and Larder store in Bronte, New South Wales.
Mm-hmm.
Broth bar and larder, sorry. And it's incredible concept. It's a broth bar. Have you ever heard of that? It's the first time I've seen it. I think it's the first broth bar. And she does nutritionally dense meals and broths and kombuchas and that kind of stuff. They make it in-house. Everything's made from scratch using the highest quality ingredients. I'm ashamed to say she uses high quality ingredients in her kitchen that I use at home. Sometimes I will be rushing to get something from the supermarket because all the organic shops are closed. But with her, she's just sourcing everything. She knows exactly where all her food comes from. And it stems from a really interesting story that she's had with her own health and transitioning away from a career in law into a career in providing health by making whole foods to her community. And just such a sharp, intelligent woman with a lot of interesting conversation around whole foods and their benefit. And what I really loved about this podcast in particular is that it kind of gives you this really broad view of the importance of food. Soulla really articulates it very, very well. And she really contributed to this podcast by giving us something, a quirky journey that we can actually give as an introduction to a lot of people when they're just starting off on this journey, where she's just given such a really wide overview of what nutritionally dense omnivorous diet looks like. And it's a fantastic podcast.
Yeah.
So do you want to add anything to that, Jo?
I just love how simply she explains everything, and it just, how am I trying to say it? Like, it's very succinct, but it just makes so much sense. And I think we've had some amazing speakers on our podcast lately, and I think Soula's up there with the best. She just really explains why it's so important to eat this way and how to do it. So, yeah, it's great.
Fantastic. All right, guys. Well, enjoy the show, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Soulla Chamberlain, hello and welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Hi, Soulla.
Soulla, I've been drooling over your Instagram for the past couple of years since I met you, and we really love what you're doing at Star Anise Organic Wholefoods, and it just looks like the kind of business that really should be the norm, but the success that you're having is because it's kind of the exception these days. And we'd really love to know who you are and how you got into creating this really beautiful and successful and ethical business, and where the ideas and the motivation that you had around that come from. So can you start off by introducing yourself and tell us what you do and how you got there?
Yes, for sure. So I'm the creator and director of a whole foods brand called Star Anise Organic Wholefoods, and the founder of Sydney's first dedicated broth bar called Broth Bar and Larder in Bronte.
Awesome.
I'm also a real and traditional foods cooking instructor, a health coach, a wellness blogger, a lover of the sun and surf, and basically I'm on a serious mission to bring nutrient-dense traditional whole foods back to the modern table. And how I got started in this is I turned to a nutrient-dense traditional whole foods diet and started embracing more natural lifestyle choices about 10 years ago after I met with a spectacular crash with rock bottom after many years growing up on a standard Western diet, followed by a vegetarian diet and years of working long, stressful hours as a corporate lawyer. So once upon a time, I had more osteoskeletal issues than anybody I'd ever met. I had digestive issues. I stopped menstruating. I had cystic acne. I became legally blind. I lived with chronic neck, back and shoulder pain. Our little boy, who we were also raising as a vegetarian, ended up in hospital with bronchial pneumonia at 11 months and round of antibiotics. And it was at that point that I thought, gosh, there's just got to be a better way. And through my naturopath, I stumbled across the works of Dr. Weston A. Price, who basically, for those who don't know who he is, he was a dentist or scientist in the 1920s who went and examined and lived with and studied numerous different, I think 14 different traditional societies all around the world to determine if they had spectacular health and what were they eating. And he found a common theme that all the foods they were eating shared this characteristic of being an omnivorous diet rich in nutrient-dense, whole, unprocessed foods. And that was a very inconvenient conclusion for a very hardcore macro-body vegetarian/vegan. And I resisted for another year until I then raised the white flag and thought, you know what, nothing changes if nothing changes. Why don't I give this a go? So I was disappointed when I went out into the marketplace 10 years ago and I couldn't find these ancestral foods. No one was making and selling bone broth. No one was making and selling broth-based soups or slow-cooked casseroles or organic chicken liver pate. There were no really crispy activated nuts on the market in Sydney 10 years ago. There was certainly no kombucha or beef kvass, and there was, not even any raw sauerkraut, and all the raw treats still were loaded with agave syrup and refined sugar. Yeah. So out of desperation, what did I do? I just got back into my kitchen and I just started making this food from scratch myself in my kitchen with two little kids at my ankles. And within a matter of months, if not weeks, my ailing family went from barely surviving to thriving. So all my osteoskeletal issues vanished. I had this, glowing skin and complexion. My period returned. I stopped breaking bones. My osteo says it's like treating a completely different body. My ex-husband or husband at the time went on to start competing in Ironman events and coming within the top 5% of his age group. And our children never, have been sick since and have seen the inside of a doctor's surgery. And I just thought, wow, this is really powerful. This is all through food. Food really is medicine. This is just through changing our diet. And I just really wanted to share my story with the world. And friends would say to me, well, can you just make a little bit extra for me and we'll buy it off you? And then friends of friends would say the same thing. And the circle just kept expanding and expanding and expanding until one day I was standing and I thought, oh, crap, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. I now have to give up my very day job as a corporate lawyer in pursuit of organic whole foods. So that's how the products came into being. It's just through out of desperation, me wanting to consume them, not being able to find them, and started crafting them from scratch in my house. And, back then 10 years ago, really the only whole cookbook was Sally Fallon's Nourishing Traditions. And I just kind of, put my own twists and turns on it and really refined it and simplified it. And then the cooking classes started because I wanted to empower women to make this food themselves in their kitchen, There's something just, really kinesthetic about getting back into the kitchen and using our hands and making this food from scratch that nourishes our family. So that's why I've been running cooking classes pretty much every week for the past 8 years. Starting off from my home, and then I moved them across to Broth Bar and Larder. And then the one-on-one health coaching session started because I could see that people still were really, confused about all the misinformation out there and had this real thirst and hunger to take their health to the next level. But, with so much confusion about, saturated fats and high fat, low fat, people didn't know what they should be eating. And so that's where I sit down with people over a 2 to 3 hour session, one-on-one, and we go through what I call the fundamentals of good nutrition. What are we designed to eat? What are we not designed to eat? Where do we get it from most affordably? What do I have for breakfast, lunch and dinner and snacks? How do I healthy swap from processed foods to nutrient-dense whole foods without my family even knowing? What type of water filter to buy? And then, the blogging started because that was a way of just, sharing what I know. I really love real food and I just love sharing what I know. And then it got to a point where my 10 or 13 staff and I outgrew my little house. And so 2 years ago, Broth Bar and Larder opened its doors in Bronte, and everything is still handmade on the premises, using certified organic ingredients locally. And it's just a beautiful little hub where people can go and eat good old-fashioned food that their great-grandmother used to make. It's simply an extension of my kitchen.
I love it. That's amazing. What a beautiful business.
Thank you.
And what I really love is following you on Instagram and seeing all the delicious stuff that you're making. And I also look at the stuff that you're having. Like, for instance, you have these sticky beef spare ribs that you put up on Instagram recently, and that's it. And you're selling it for $22.50 for a 500 gram serve with like beautiful salad, and all these things are certified organic, as you're saying. And one of the things that we are told quite often when people are trying to eat healthy is that, hey, this is really expensive and I can't afford it. And it seems that your prices really aren't that much more expensive than Sydney cafe prices at all. And they're not even using these ingredients. So I'm just wondering how you're managing to create a success out of this financially, and to be able to have a successful business and still use all these amazing ingredients.
Oh, that's such a great question. And I think my consultant was standing with me right now because he's just trawled through my books over the past few months. He would be like laughing because he's saying to me, Star Anise Organic Wholefoods is a great community service. It's a little bit like that at the moment. Obviously there's going to be a point where I'm going to have to start making some money. I'm paying my bills, I'm paying my staff, I'm paying suppliers, and that's awesome. And I really love it. It brings me so much, nourishment for my soul, and it's beautiful. So I've just gone through a process of, trying to, we've restructured the wholesale arm. We've looked at what's profitable, what's not, and, maybe ask me in a year's time. Yeah, so for the moment, my head is above water just, and I just kind of really want to make it, also affordable for people. And, what I say to people is, if you cut out all the processed foods, just redirect that money into real nutrient-dense food. And when you start eating this way, you become so much more vibrantly healthy that you're not spending your money on supplements or, going to doctor's surgery. So, prevention is the best cure. People say, gosh, organic food is expensive. And my response is, well, actually, that is the real cost of food. It's not subsidized. It's, and secondly, you think real food is expensive. Have you seen the cost of cancer recently? So it's either pay now or pay later.
That's a good answer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we do get questions sometimes from people who own cafes and restaurants asking about how to do this, because Fuad obviously did it himself, and it's pretty tough. But I'm so glad that there are people out there like you who are willing to, it's not easy to be different than all the other cafes and restaurants, surely, and have to pay so much more for your ingredients. Well, not so much more, but more than they are paying. But it's just such a beautiful result, and the food is just so nourishing, like you're saying. And so I know for myself, I wish that we had more of these around the place. We don't have much of that up here where I live, far north Queensland.
I don't want to get asked all the time on social media, can you please open up a broth bar in, just Melbourne or
all over Australia.
But for the moment, I want to keep it quite small and artisan and boutique and really high quality, and I don't want to ever compromise on the quality. And look, if it can, turn a profit at one point, then I can obviously look into expanding if that feels true to me at that point in time.
No, it's beautiful.
I'm looking at the amazing transformation that you and your family had in such a short period of time, and I look at the work of Weston A. Price, which both Joe and I are very familiar with. And the Weston A. Price Foundation is such an incredible foundation and such a great resource for people around eating whole foods. But the book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Dr. Weston A. Price is a bit of a hard read for a lot of people, even though it's quite an eye-opening read. And not everyone's going to commit to it. And the principles that you're bringing to people in your health coaching, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, how you took those things that you learned from the Weston A. Price Foundation, and which is, really expressed in the food that you're eating, but how did you break it down to your clients, and how do you educate them on the importance of whole foods and how they should be eating for their own health? Can you talk a little bit about that for us?
For sure. So I kind of, with all my learnings over the past, 1 or 2 decades, what I distilled it down to, and being the lawyer that I am, like what I love to do is basically be able to summarize and sift through large amounts of information and break it down really, really simply for people. And what I discovered is this, that modern science shows us that the genes we inherit from our parents are only responsible for a very, very small fraction of our health. And our health is, in fact, largely dependent upon a number of different environmental or lifestyle factors. And the 2 broad categories of these environmental factors that influence our health are nourishment on the one hand and toxins on the other hand. So really, to enhance your health, the broad brush formula is pretty simple. It comes down to increasing nourishment in all areas of our life and reducing toxins in all areas of our life. So if I get my health coaching clients to really understand that, is what I'm doing, eating, moving, doing to my body, is it nourishing my body, or is it, detracting from my body because it creates a toxin inside my body, or it is a toxin? And so nourishment certainly embraces nutrients, micronutrients, vitamins and minerals. And what I explain to my clients is this, that all of the systems, functions and structure of the human body are built from and run on one thing and one thing only, and that is nutrients. So from our digestive system, endocrine system, immune system, nervous system, musculoskeletal system, reproductive system, brain function, skin health, the whole kit and caboodle built from and run on nutrients. So therefore, the more nutrient-rich foods you eat, the more those systems and structure and functions of the human body can really fire on all 6 cylinders, which is why I'm always banging on and on about nutrient-rich food. And then toxins, the flip side of the coin, are things that are really compromising to the human body. So there's dietary toxins, environmental toxins, as well as toxins that the body manufactures internally when it's under stress. And toxins make the body have to work so much harder to try and eliminate them. And toxins cause inflammation of the body, inflammation of the tissues. And we know that inflammation is the root cause of all modern disease, okay? So eating, therefore, a low inflammatory diet that's nutrient rich, for me, is just one of the easiest ways of reclaiming and maintaining spectacular health with the most profound impact. And in my health coaching sessions, I further break down these 2 broad environmental lifestyle factors of nourishment and toxins into 8 lifestyle factors, what I call the 8 foundations of health. So our health is dependent upon what we eat, nutrition, what we drink, hydration, the quality of our sleep, quality of our movement, how and what we breathe, then what goes on in our head, our thoughts, so stress management, and then are we spending time in nature, or are we divorced from it, and then fun, play and connection with ourselves or with others. So each of these 8 lifestyle choices can either be a source of nourishment or a source of toxicity in the body. And I work with clients to basically, we just go through each of the 8 foundations and I get them to reduce the mismatch. So the mismatch between our genes, our biology, and what they are actually eating and drinking and sleeping. And illness and disease simply happens where there is a mismatch. So it's educating people on the mismatch and just try and reduce it. And here's the kicker. Because we control to a large degree these environmental factors, it means that we control to a large degree the expression of our and our children's genes. And, what an awesome and empowering responsibility that is, especially as a parent.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Joe, do you want to ask the next question? I keep asking questions over.
It sounds like we're very much on the same track, aren't we? Just that's what we're trying to help people with as well. And it's so beautiful to have a one-on-one coach because so many people feel very overwhelmed. Have you got any great stories to tell us that you wouldn't mind sharing of the turnarounds that you've seen in clients' health?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess the most touching is when people can then, ovulate and make a baby.
Yeah.
And, when I see proof of that, and, all these beautiful mums with their babies come into Broth Bar and say, this baby's in existence because you helped me to get my period back.
Oh.
And, all this baby, looks so vibrant with such a broad face thanks to the food I was eating. You telling me about it. And just, also athletes. So in 2012, I was the nutrition coach for the Sydney Roosters, and my mandate was very clear. I was to get them from the bottom of the ladder to the top of the ladder, and they gave me a year to do it, which I did by changing their diet. Right. And people can read all about that on my blog post, which I called The Rise of the Roosters. So for any kind of cool men out there like, oh, yeah, diet doesn't really have anything to do with anything. In that blog post, I interviewed the former captain, Anthony Minicello, and I just said, what did you guys eat? How did you get from the bottom to the top? And just even little things like, things like, clearing up skin and gas and bloating and creaky joints and aches. So these things might be considered normal in today's society, but they're not natural. So what I call these are the canaries in the coal mine. They're like the symptoms of the mismatch. And so, I say to my clients, okay, why is this, is this happening? Where is this mismatch? Let's work together to go through all of these 8 foundations to reduce the mismatch. And then the canaries in the coal mine, they just disappear. Like, I don't really have to talk to clients about losing weight, removing their PMT, clearing their skin. These things just automatically happen when the mismatch is reduced and our body is operating in homeostasis. So at the end of the day, the greatest yearning of the human body is homeostasis. The body wants to, we'll move molecules to try to get back into balance. And given half the chance, the body wants to do that. And all we have to do is just get out of its way and facilitate it.
No, definitely. We had a beautiful interview last week with Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride, which was very exciting. And
I love her.
Oh, she's so beautiful. And one of the things that I love so much about her is her focus on the foods that she was raised with and the foods that her grandmother used to heal her when she was a small child and very sick, and how those foods are, what we should still be eating. And I love that. That's what you've got in your business, is these traditional foods. So is this how you were raised, with these kind of foods, and you went away from it and got sicker, or did you, were you raised with the traditional foods of your culture?
Not really. Like, my parents came to Australia in the 1950s and kind of were allured by, the processed foods, because it was a sign of health in a way, like, white refined sugar, white refined flour, margarine instead of butter. So I was raised, on your typical Western conventional diet. Like, we had Wonder White bread, margarine. I had a glass of Coke with every meal.
Oh, wow.
I know, so no wonder I brought children and had cavities, and, we had full access to confectionery. Look, my parents did the best job they could, but they just didn't know any better. Having said all that, we also did have, some traditional foods, like, we had livers occasionally. My mum and dad grew a lot of their own vegetables, and I remember lots of fresh herbs were used. We had meat, whether or not it was pastured, probably not. So I had a kind of, a bit of both.
Yeah.
A mixture. And then, I think being a macrobiotic vegetarian / vegan, particularly with my first pregnancy, that just really, and I thought I was being healthy. I didn't appreciate that, as Homo sapiens, we're designed to eat, to be omnivores. And my body just became so demineralized. So that's when crash and burnout occurred, and I just went looking for answers. And, I do see a lot of people who are vegetarian, and, I do spend a lot of time having to say, I was there in your position. I was really hardcore, but at the end of the day, we're all part of this thing called the circle of life. And, soil and fertilizer is made up of dead animals. That's what blood and bone is. And we just, we have to come to our food and at the table with a sense of humility and respect for what has gone on. And, to appreciate that, to pay gratitude to everything and everyone involved in getting the food to us from soil and sea to plate. And at the end of the day, we can't be the best possible versions of ourselves. We can't be the best possible mother or daughter or sister or partner or employer or employee unless we are nourishing our body. Okay, and that, it involves eating nutrient-dense, whole, unprocessed foods. And obviously it is bio-individual. I take the basic, traditional whole foods template or ancestral diet, paleo diet, real whole foods diet, whatever you want to call it, diet. And then, we tweak it to suit individual, everybody is different. So to suit each person's unique digestive issues, or if they've got, particular gene issues or gut dysfunction. And hopefully we can then, heal the gut, resolve those issues, and they can go back to eating the full plethora of traditional whole foods by happy days.
Yeah, awesome.
I'm interested with your background as a macrobiotic vegan, how you got interested in that kind of diet, what attracted you to it, how long you spent there, and then obviously you said that you had to switch because you needed to make a change, but how would you, if you had any ethical issues around eating meat, how did you come to resolve them? And you touched upon what you say to your clients, but I'm just interested in what happened in your internal process around this.
Yeah, okay. So I turned to a vegetarian diet because at the time I was exploring a lot of Tibetan Buddhism, okay, which is a really beautiful philosophy. So I spent a lot of time in my 20s going on Buddhist meditation retreats in Nepal, and my husband at the time wanted to really explore that, and he decided I want to be a vegetarian. And I thought, okay, well, it's just easier if we're both the same thing. And I thought that was the healthy option because the government very much steers us towards a high-grain, low-fat diet. And a macrobiotic vegetarian diet fits that perfectly. So I actually thought, well, I was being healthy doing that. And I didn't really appreciate up until later that, my health was actually unraveling at every turn because I was just becoming more and more demineralized. Even though I wasn't eating any processed foods whatsoever, the foods I was eating just wasn't nutrient dense. So then, as I said, I did resist this notion of turning to an omnivorous, nutrient-dense diet for a full year after my naturopath, said to me, this is what we're designed to eat. And it wasn't until I think the turning point was when I went and saw Sally Fallon when she came to Australia in 2007 and spent a full day lecture at the University of New South Wales with her. And I just really loved how she just so beautifully tied together ancestral wisdom with modern science. And when those two come together so beautifully, that really turns me on. I think my first port of call after that was straight to a butcher shop. So what I kind of have come to terms with is not all meat is created equal. The source and provenance of it is of absolute importance. And I was saying this to a lady just yesterday in my health coaching session. She's like, but the way meat is raised is, livestock is raised is appalling. And some of them, yes, is appalling. And when it comes to animals, I am not at all advocating the industrial feedlot model. What I'm advocating is that we get our animals from, wild or pastured sources free of hormones, antibiotics, and industrial feed. And, I spend a lot of time, with farmers doing my due diligence to the nth degree to make sure that the source and provenance, the provenance of where I'm getting things from, these farmers are raising their animals in the way that nature intended. So, all the red meat, the ruminant animals, they're grass-fed and finished. The animals are treated humanely. Chickens and pigs are raised on pasture, in sunshine, eating what they're biologically designed to eat. Fish is wild and never farmed. Okay, chickens are foraging on, worms and seed pods and veggie scraps and what they're, biologically designed to eat. And also reading a book, Leah Keith, the Vegetarian Myth. Yeah. I think that's really profound, and she articulates that so beautifully. So that's a great resource for anyone who's still struggling with that. The Dalai Lama eats meat as far, when I last researched that, because he became sick without it. So it's eating mindfully, consciously, making sure the animals are fed what, they're biologically designed to eat. I go and visit the farms, I ask them questions, and, that way my children get a strong sense of connection with the food that they're eating. Like, let's be curious, let's have this greater sense of connection with our food and with the seasons and where it comes from.
So important. Beautiful.
Yeah, I love the way you articulate things, Soulla. Can you explain a basic concept, but it might be a bit unclear to our listeners? You mentioned nutrient density quite often, and maybe you can dig into that a little bit and tell us what nutrient-dense food is and what food that is not nutrient-dense is.
Yeah, great question. So nutrient density, I'm talking there about micronutrients, so vitamins and minerals, okay? So basically some nutrient-dense foods are things like, well, number one is organ meats. And before people turn up their nose about eating livers and heart and brain and kidney and intestines of animals, know that livers, all these food, organ meats, are the most nutrient-dense food on the planet, bar none. When people talk to me about superfoods, I'm like, okay, great, let's talk livers,
Love it.
All these other, superfoods that are out there. It's like that's, so high in iron, vitamin A, D and K2 are like, so important for wide facial formation of children. A narrow face is a lack of vitamin A, D and K2 in utero and in the formative years. And, a broad face isn't just, cosmetic. It's important for wide dental arch and, being able to breathe properly. So that's why I'm so passionate about running organ meat workshops, which I'm going to be running. I've run them in the past, and I'll be running them. It's my next workshop that I'll be running this year, just so people can learn how to cook. Arm them with the tools on how to cook it and how to make it palatable, where to get it from. Take that ick factor out, which is purely cultural.
Yeah.
Okay. Other nutrient food are things like your muscle meat. On it. We don't need to eat huge amounts. I'm just talking about 1 palm size and palm thickness protein per day. Bone broths. Okay, bone broths might not be micronutrient rich, but they do contain collagen, gelatin, and glycine, which are really important. So collagen's really important for building and maintaining your osteoskeletal system. It's really important for hair, skin, and nails. Gelatin is all about gut healing and sealing and, healthy bowel movements. And glycine is important to balance out our muscle meat intake. We should be eating glycine-rich foods, and it provides, feelings of mental calmness and stability and sound sleep. And then you've got, wild seafood, because there's stuff in wild seafood like iodine that isn't found as plentiful in land animals. And then you've got, your pastured eggs, and a pastured egg yolk is what I call, a multivitamin. And then you've got, full fat, unprocessed dairy if it's tolerated. And I know there's a lot of controversy with dairy, but my issue is if it's well sourced, it's unprocessed, you can digest it and you like it, why not eat it,
Yeah.
Then you've got, chemical-free, fresh, seasonal vegetables, small amounts of seasonal fruit, lacto-fermented foods that are really high in probiotics, good bacteria that have a profound impact on our immunity, our digestion, brain health, skin health, metabolism, bone health. And, they're saying now that the seat of our health lies in our gut. So I work with clients to get their gut sorted so that, the rest of their body can be sorted. And then small amounts of activated nuts and seeds. This is nuts and seeds that have been properly prepared through soaking and dehydrating to remove phytates and other anti-nutrients that are naturally found in raw nuts and seeds that cause digestive havoc. So traditional societies the world over found that if they soaked their nuts and seeds in rainwater then sun-dried them, these anti-nutrients would be reduced, thus activating or liberating the nutrients found inside them, making them, bioavailable. And then you've got things like, unrefined salt, which is, packed with minerals, unrefined herbs and spices, things like raw cacao powder. These things, are not a hardship to eat. When I say to people, okay, you can have breakfast, your bacon and your eggs, they're like, what, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, cook them in lots of butter and, it's not a hardship. This is delicious food because nutrients are precisely what gives food its flavour. So the more nutrient-rich foods you eat, the more flavoursome it is, and then we don't have to add any additives or flavour enhancers because it already is delicious. This is why processed foods are loaded with those things, because it's basically a dead food. It's devoid of nutrients. So to make it palatable, they have to pump it full of flavours, colours, and preservatives. So yeah, that's basically a potted summary of my favourite nutrient-dense whole foods.
Beautiful. Can I ask you a practical cooking question?
Sure.
What do you recommend people make with beef liver?
Oh, look, you can sneak livers into any food, any recipe that calls for minced meat.
That's true. Okay? So that's true.
I call them sneaky meals. So yes. At Broth Bar, we often do sneaky bunless burgers, sneaky bolognese, sneaky shepherd's pie. If you start off with, say, a small amount, 20% of beef liver or even, calf liver or lamb's liver, and put it in with your mincemeat, no one will even know it's there. Yeah. Okay, and then you can work on increasing it. So that's a really good way. You can, and if it's really unpalatable, like as Chris Kresser says, you could cut it up into little pill-sized portions, raw, freeze it, and then just take a liver pill. So, there's really no excuse. And I've got other little sneaky ways of shaving really small amounts of raw frozen liver, throwing it into my morning smoothie. If the amount is small enough, you won't taste it.
You won't notice it, yeah.
Anthony Minicello, former captain of the Sydney Roosters, gave me that tip. But you'll work up to chicken liver's obviously the most palatable.
Yeah, and that one's easy.
And then the beef liver. But, I tell you, I had one client who was, pregnant, on the verge of getting a blood transfusion because her iron level was so low, and she just smashed the beef for every single day. And, went back, and after, a few weeks, the doctor was astounded and said, it's a 13-fold increase. We don't see these results even on the most potent of iron supplements. So whatever you're doing, just keep doing it.
That's awesome. Yeah, as most families find their kids, if they haven't been raised on it from young, they'll kind of buck and, no, I don't want liver. And so for a while there, I got away with it by calling it meat dip when I made pate. Or pudding. But, otherwise I pretty much have to mince it up into mince. But, it's always good to get some more ideas.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so I really love the way that you rattled off that list of nutritionally dense foods. And I think the only way, that's a trick question. You can ask a vegan that, and they probably don't have the mental capacity to rattle it off in that kind of way. They don't even know. So
she's been feeding her brain so well. See,
that's right. Eating all the organ meats and the egg yolks, and it's all happening, and you can see that so clearly. And also, when I met you in person, I remember it was really striking to see how healthy you look. Like you really glow with health, and it's just so wonderful to know that you've created this broth bar and larder. And I'm wondering, I've got a few questions for you, but I'll start off with one of them as to, for instance, today, what do you guys have on the menu? What are you serving?
Today, it's the sneaky bunless burgers. We've got caramelized onion and grated carrots and Gruyere raw milk cheese, which is the famous Swiss melting cheese.
Wow.
And I've got my dad's recipe for pickled beetroot. So I really love injecting some of my own, family recipes in there. And lettuce, and and then homemade tomato sauce. So beautiful. Once again, out of desperation, I had to make my own homemade tomato sauce years ago because there was no crap-free tomato sauce on the market. So I basically set the menu every quarter, so 3 months in advance. So every day is something different, and some dishes are just a lot more popular, so we tend to have them more frequently, like the sneaky shepherd's pie or the fish curry. But the casseroles and the slow-cooked meals are very much our staple.
Well, what's your view on gluten, and do you serve that at the broth bar?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So with gluten, what I say to my clients is I explain to them that we are not biologically designed to eat grains and legumes. They only came into play with the advent of agriculture, which was 10,000 years ago, and that might seem like a big number, 10,000, but in the context of human evolution of 2.6 million years ago, when our genes were set, 10,000 years ago is a tiny blip on that time scale. And they do literally contain toxins in the outer husk. So gluten can damage the lining of the gut, making it leaky, and then you're just one step away from autoimmunity. The gluten can bind and trap the minerals in the grains and legumes. They inhibit enzymes we need to digest our food, so gas and bloating can be the result of that. They're not really nutrient dense, not sort of in the same way that your pastured animal products are, and they readily get converted to sugar in the body. So the bottom line is grains do more harm than good, especially the gluten grains. But are there any safe grains? So what I say is, my view is, if you don't have digestive or blood sugar issues, the occasional consumption, so, once a week, say, for example, or, whatever floats your boat, once a week, once a fortnight. So if you don't have digestive or blood sugar issues, the occasional consumption of properly prepared, so that's soaked, sprouted or fermented, gluten-free grains like white rice, buckwheat, amaranth, millet, quinoa, and legumes is fine, provided it doesn't displace nutrient-rich foods in the diet. So every now and again, we'll have soaked white rice porridge for breakfast. And I've got the recipe for that on my website. And I boost nutrient density by adding, cooking it in lots of, full-fat milk, and adding in lots of butter and cream and egg yolks and topping it with some fresh fruit and some activated nuts. And then I also go on to say to my clients, if you don't have digestive or blood sugar issue and you don't have the celiac gene, which you can test for, the occasional consumption of properly prepared gluten grains, e.g. sourdough bread, is fine, provided you don't outwardly react to gluten and it doesn't displace nutrient-dense foods in the diet, and you really slather on the butter and other nutrient-dense toppings like anchovies and sardines and pate and avocado. Now, I know this view is controversial, and this is where my strict paleo mates and I part company, because they'll say, no gluten ever. You just don't know when it's going to release too much of that molecule called zonulin that, bam, will cause a leaky gut. And I appreciate that is a risk. But just like getting into a car or getting into a plane, I know there's a risk that there could be an accident. But I'm willing to live with that risk because I personally don't have digestive or blood sugar issues. I don't have the celiac gene. I don't outwardly react to gluten like sourdough bread. And I only have it occasionally. It's not an everyday food. And I really slather on the butter and nutrient-dense toppings. And a lot of it comes down to, how do you feel when you have it? Do you have the celiac gene? Is it properly prepared? So there's a world of difference between, white refined bread and your, artisan bread that's been made with organic flour and that's been properly prepared through soaking, sprouting, or fermenting. So that's why we do sell the Iggy sourdough bread, because I think it's, one of the best in terms of, if you're going to eat it, eat the best quality you can find. So that's my view on it.
That's good.
Looking at the photos of the workshops that you do, I see something that's very, very familiar to me that we see in our seminars, and it's pretty much an overwhelming majority, if not 100% of the attendees are female. And I'm wondering if that's just representative of the audience and the clientele that come to your broth bar, or is it, do you have a good mix of men and women who come, and what do you do to get men more interested in this way of eating?
Yeah, it's certainly the people who follow me and the people who are my customers and clientele are mostly women. Now, whether or not that's because I am female, in my 40s, and so therefore I'm going to attract, therefore women mostly in their 40s or mums, with kids, because, that's who I am, or whether it's because traditionally females take on more of that domestic cooking role. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's certainly true. We do have, having said that, we do have men coming in, and, some of the staff, when they start working there, pull me aside and say, Soula, I had no idea there's so many hot men that walk in. What are you doing?
Well, you could be attracting that too.
I don't know about that. But whether or not, I think people nowadays are, especially in Sydney's eastern suburbs, we are, becoming more and more educated on what makes us tick and thrive. So people, I think, generally are becoming more interested in their health, both males and females. So, we do get a lot of athletes coming in. We certainly do get men coming in. But, yeah, it is mostly females. And, I don't try to market to one way or the other. I am who I am. I share what I know, and whoever, whoever is attracted to that, great. Sometimes I've got kids coming to my cooking classes, sometimes adult boys, and that's really lovely.
Yeah, that's good.
You spoke about the two principal drivers of health, and then you mentioned the 8 foundations of health. Can you list those for us and focus on the top 2 that you'd like to talk about the most?
In terms of the 8 foundations of health, well, for me, it's, the first 2, nutrition and hydration. That's kind of my gig, my thing. That's not to say that, the others aren't important. So, the others being sleep and, breath and stress management and spending time in nature and having a strong sense of connection with yourself and movement, they are all important. But the reason I focus on the diet, nutrition, hydration, is this. I think that if you nail the diet, you're like 90% there. If you've got those micronutrients and the amino acids and the saturated fats that fuel your body, you then have the energy and the bandwidth to then take on board these other 6 foundations of health. Like, saying to someone, you've got to, get out into nature and you've got to start exercising, and they're just like in this, so brain fogged because they're so demineralized, that's a hard call. So getting them to really focus on their diet is, for me, I call it the low-hanging fruit, because you've got to eat 3 times a day, right? So you got to, you always have a choice as to what you're eating and what food you're buying. You're doing it anyway. So are you choosing nutrient-rich, unprocessed whole foods, or are you choosing processed foods? Okay, you've got that choice. So for me, the diet's the low-hanging fruit, because it's the easiest and fastest way of reclaiming and maintaining spectacular health. Once you start eating and nourishing your body with what we're designed to eat, and you cut out all the processed foods, the feedback your body gives you is almost immediate. You start feeling better within a matter of days, okay? And then, weeks and certainly months later, a lot of people are like, oh, my God, I just feel like a completely different person. So that's why I really focus on, nutrition and hydration.
Well, what are your tips for hydration?
Okay, so really the only things we should be drinking is pure water, fermented foods and fermented drinks like, beef kvass and kombucha, water, kefir, and bone broth. That's, essentially, and raw, unprocessed dairy, liquid milk if you can tolerate it. Things like, juices and energy drinks. I'm not really a fan of. They're kind of empty fillers. I'm a fan of whole foods, so that's why I don't like to have fruit juice, because it's just really too high fructose, and Mother Nature just really got it right with a piece of fruit, because everything is in there in the most perfect balance. If people want to have a small amount of, wine or clean spirits every now and again, and, that can be a source of, like very medicinal and can be a source of nourishment. Obviously, it's there's a quantity issue there, because like for me, having half or 1 glass can be like a medicine every now and again, but having more than that quickly turns into a poison or a toxin. And in terms of water, like I think that, that's the bulk of what we should be drinking. And the 2 fundamental criteria here are, number 1, pure water. So there's things in tap water like fluoride, chlorine, and heavy metals that are really undesirable and have a toxic effect on the body. So I say to people, unless you're going to go and find, a spring or glacial runoff, you really need to get yourself a water filter, or, if you have a rain tank, that's awesome. So then I put people in touch with a company that can install a reverse osmosis water filtration system, which is the highest level of water filtration in Australia. It takes everything out and reconstructs H2O. Now, to that pure water, I always advise people, once again, unless there's some genetic issue, to add in a pinch of salt to that water, to add back minerals lost through filtration, and to keep the electrolyte balance of the blood constant, okay? So unrefined salt, like, Himalayan crystal salt or sea salt, certainly not your Saxa table salt, which is stripped of all minerals and highly refined and toxic.
How much would you say to put in, like a pinch in how much, 1 cup?
My formula is about I'd say about 1/8 of a teaspoon per litre.
Okay, good.
Now, you can increase that to 1/4 of a teaspoon per litre if you're an athlete or you're sweating profusely or you get muscle cramps at night. That's often caused by a lack of magnesium, particularly in summer when we're sweating a lot. So for me, I have to put in at least 1/4 of a teaspoon of unrefined salt per litre. So what I say to my clients is grab buy a whole heap of stainless steel water bottles, and we've got about, half a dozen of them. I fill them all up at night with filtered water, add your salt in, and then in the morning they're just ready to go. I give a bottle each to the kids, and I just carry them around with me all day. Wherever I am, if I'm driving, if I'm at my desk, if I'm at the shops, I'm just carrying around a water bottle, and I'm just drinking constantly in between meals. And we don't want to drink really with meals, because drinking water with meals tends to, can dilute the hydrochloric acid content of your stomach and, dilute all the nutrients. So we want to drink water in between meals. And that also fends off hunger, and you're not snacking. And then, we're designed to be hunter-gatherers, not grazers. So we're designed to have punctuated meals, 2 to 3, good square meals a day with big intervals in between, to give our digestive system a break and to actually learn to feel hungry again.
Yeah, that's good advice. So if we could just ask you how people can find out about where you are and what you do, and where can they find you? Where are you online?
Yeah, so my website is staraniseorganic.com, and then they can also follow me. Also on the website, there's information about health coaching and about broth bar and larder, and about my cooking classes. And we've got an online store, so there's a lot of information online. And then in social media, my social media handles are Star Anise Organic, so Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm small enough to make myself available to anyone, which is why I still have my mobile phone number on my website. I really love getting calls from clients and customers, Most of the time people, make inquiries straight to Broth Bar, especially if it's about, a product we sell there, and that's Broth Bar is located at 49 Belgrave Street, Bronte. But if people want to call me directly, I make myself available to people. They can email me at info@staraniseorganic.com. Yeah. And
you said the shop online, does it have foods? Yes, it does. I just had a look. Oh, wow. Looks good.
Yeah, that's all our Star Anise Organic Wholefood products. So at the moment, they are cold or refrigerated products. They're only available to Sydney and Wollongong residents, so same-day courier. Outside of those geographical regions, it's dry goods only, so like activated nuts and activated muesli. And I'm rolling out more and more online workshops to teach people how to cook in the comfort of their own home, because I had a lot of demand from people who couldn't make it to my cooking classes over the past 8 years in Sydney. Can you please make them online? So there's a slow cook workshop, an online bone broth workshop, the online gluten-free baked cakes workshop. All my workshops will eventually be rolled out online, so you can just download it, save it on your PC, and just have a look at it in the comfort of your own home. And you get a video and a comprehensive workshop booklet as if you had attended an in-person workshop here in Sydney.
Oh, that's great.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Soulla, for being on the show with us. It's been really a great podcast, and you articulated all your topics so well. Very happy to have you on the show, and hope to see you in May at the Mind Forum when you're there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
Thanks so much, Soulla.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.